Hello, and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Today, we are joined by the fabulous Debra Corey, consultant, speaker, 6 times author, and a top HR influencer, passionate about supporting companies and leaders creating amazing cultures and experiences for employees. She's a true lover of an acronym or two, so please join us as we talk with Debra about being the ABC in a positive culture. Debra, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be a part of this podcast today.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you. And I am known to you and you to me a little bit, but I think this is the first time of meeting Bridge, isn't it?
It is, yes. Getting to know you.
Yeah, and I'm really, really excited to have you on, Debra, because often, much as it's lovely, many of our guests are people that we do know and we know well. And so having a slightly unknown quantity, but someone who is so prolific in terms of things that I hold very dear, I've sort of been doing a little bit of stalking of you online to see that you very much share an approach that resonates with me. So I'm super excited to be able to chat.
Fabulous. Now, Debra, whilst I've given the sort of stock answer in terms of your introduction, we love our guests to be able to introduce themselves. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to say something about yourself first. Now, we don't often either talk in job titles, but I am thoroughly intrigued by your Chief Pay It Forward Officer title as well. So I'm breaking our own rules about talking in job titles as well. So if you were able to say a little bit about yourself and how you have come to this glorious title as well, I would be very happy to hear.
Sure. I know it is a very unique title, which sort of defines who I am. But I didn't start out that way. I've been an HR person my entire career. As a matter of fact, my last year in university, I worked part-time in my university's HR department and fell in love with HR, and then worked in lots of different organizations, different industries, let's see, from engineering to roller coasters to jeans to everything in between and different countries. And when I wrote my second book, I've written 6 now. When I wrote my second book, I worked for a company and I wrote the book with my CEO, and he sent me around the world doing talks about it and doing workshops. And it sort of opened my eyes to being able to do something different with all my HR experience. And that's when I decided to go on my own. And I was sick of all the boring HR titles I'd had before, like reward leader, HR leader, nothing very exciting that explained what I did. So I thought I was all about paying it forward. So I just came up with the title Chief Pay It Forward Officer. And that's really what my mantra and my mission is helping people look at things different, challenge the status quo, and paying it forward to help the next generation so that when I retire and move on and travel the world again, not working, they have the tools they need to do it great.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. I love the sound of the range of industries that you've actually worked in as well. But why these boring titles? It doesn't really say what it does on the tin either, does it? A lot of the time.
Yeah, and it's really been interesting just to see the evolution of HR titles. And it is getting better. I remember, we moved from personnel, this is how old I am, personnel, then to HR, then to people. And we're talking about culture today. Some people now have culture. One of my favorite people in the world, her name is Claude Silver in the US. Her title is Head of Happiness. So I think we are getting more creative and a bit more descriptive. Also, so people aren't afraid of us. I mean, who wants to go talk to the personnel manager? Whereas I'd talk to a happiness manager or a culture manager.
Absolutely. And I think that, I'm veering off now. Debra, you and I have talked before about the onset of grandchildren and wanting different things in life, but still really wanting to do things with organizations to help in terms of engagement and helping with people, the people side of life. But I loved having the people title more than anything else, because HR just always sounded like it was something to be shut off from. And I think the other thing for me with the people title, and we're now going to get into talking about culture, is that whilst culture has been potentially some level of responsibility, in HR departments or in people departments, whatever they want to be called. I guess where you're at, and maybe some of the things that you can say, is that culture's everybody's responsibility. The people being it, the people leading it, the people managing it. And I wonder if we could open up with that, with some of the things that you are finding with what you're doing around positive culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think culture and people in general are collective responsibilities. And I think that's a big shift. You're right. In the past, I mean, I can remember I worked at a retail organization and we used to have the bat phone on weekends. So if any of the stores had any problems with employees, they would call us on the bat phone. And I remember someone calling me on a Saturday and they're like, I think somebody might have stolen something. One of our employees stole something from the store. What should I do? I'm thinking, why are they calling me? You know, they are responsible for their people. And I just had to ask them some questions so that they could see that actually they could handle it on their own. So, you know, going back to your question, I genuinely believe that it is collective responsibility. And I think what that does is it changes the emphasis of what we do in the people function, in the culture. I was going to say one other silly story in that I still believe there's a need for the function. I remember a couple of years ago, I was on a panel discussion. I think I was in Norway, and I was on stage with 3 men in suits. And they went around, and the question at the end was, so what do you think will happen to the function of HR in the next 5 years? And all 3 men said that it will disappear. It will be eliminated. There will no longer be this role. And little old me, if you've ever seen me before, I'm not even 5 feet. I stood up and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Yes, the role will change, but there will always, always, always need to be someone who is putting that focus and leading the orchestra so that everyone else can play the people and culture instruments. So yeah, I'm not sure what they thought of me in Norway after that.
How did it go down though, Deborah? I mean, often the dynamic 3 men in suits with just one woman on a panel, that they're not used to being challenged. They're not used to being disagreed with.
I think the men were mortified because they saw the, you know, what they had done, especially because it was a room full of HR people. I mean, read your audience. So obviously everyone broke into applause. I did my little bow and everything like that. So yeah, I think that the men probably will watch what they say next time when they're in a room full of, you know, mostly it was probably a large percentage of women too. You know, like, oh, you're not going to have a job anymore. Yeah, fine. That's because you're a consultant who's telling me that they're going to do their job or something. But yeah, I do like being a bit challenging and controversial, as you can tell already.
I love that.
I think the other thing, oh, sorry, Bobby. I think the other thing, Deborah, that you said that effectively demonstrates that there's always going to be a need is that in the story you told, the previous one about the theft or the potential alleged theft, is that you had to coach that person. And I think there's an element in the HR happiness culture people role is that's, I come from a legal background, and so I have always looked at the sort of the balance of powers within a constitution. And actually, for me, I've always hoped that in an organization, the HR function is there to hold management accountable and to remind them when they are focused on their strategies or whatever and going down their little performance route, that actually people are at the heart of what they're doing. And I think there is a tendency or potential for organizations that have a leadership role that only focuses on delivery to completely forget that there are people at the front line without whom absolutely nothing gets done. And you're like the little Jiminy Cricket, I guess, the conscience. They're sort of reminding and bringing people back onto the right track. And that, in a way, I guess it can be very thankless. And I guess management often views HR as like, oh God, here we go. And because it has a history of being a slightly gendered role, I guess, there's also this idea that it's a bit, what's the word you hate, Bobby? Fluffy?
Yes, I don't even want to say the word because I don't like it. Can I just, sorry, because there's a lot in there, Bridge, and we definitely want to hear from Deborah in terms of her response. I am in violent agreement. I just want to say this one thing. Now, please do not think that I'm about to agree with 3 Norwegian men in suits. And using "and," remember our other episode, Bridge, I would love a world where HR isn't needed, because the managers and the leaders are doing the people piece. And I have no idea whether these Norwegian men were trying to actually implicate that. Probably not, by the sounds of things. But a perfect world would be where everyone in an organisation was keeping that front of mind. And I think that does play to what you're saying, Bridge, about the coaching and the support role, and not having an organisation thinking that people responsibilities reside only in the HR department as much as the culture only resides in the HR department. Those two, they're integral in my mind. And I'd be really interested to hear what Debra has to say about all of that.
Do you know, I agree, but I want to twist it a little bit.
Please do.
I don't want HR to be needed in the way that we're needed now. So
Yeah.
like if we could do a whole talk about AI, but if I think about like AI can come in and do those operational things that we in HR do not need to be focused on. Those are things to my mind that are behind the scenes value added or not value added. But then going back to that whole orchestra analogy, you're going to still need someone who, to your point, is coaching someone who's making sure that you've got the right instruments. You know what? You need to bring your instrument in for a recheck. Let's put you through some more training courses, or, let's switch you to another instrument, or let's have a chat about how you're feeling. So I think that I want our people to need us in different ways. And I think by doing that, actually, we won't be the big, bad, horrible people that we are. It'll be like, if I think of some of the best work I ever did in HR, it was things where, I don't know, like I did work where I completely changed our benefits strategy. And I got rid of old benefits that no longer worked. I put in new benefits. I made some tough decisions. I got rid of things that some people loved, but people were so appreciative and they understood it. And to me, that's the kind of need that I want. I want someone who's going to need me to make sure that everything's running smoothly so then they can get on and do their jobs.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm very happy with that twist. And I think if I'd have thought better about it, I'd have liked to have articulated it in the same way. So full agreement. And I'm thinking back within my HR career now as well. And it is those things. I think that's why I headed much more down the organizational development route, because I didn't like doing the employee relations. I didn't like doing all of the moaning people. And yet I've also learned, and I think that this is part of positive culture as well. I wonder about your thoughts on this, Debra, that, when it comes around to an employee relations situation, whether you are in a positive culture or not, it's human nature, real, that these things are still going to crop up. And these people, whoever they might be, whatever they might have done, also deserve to be treated like a fully fledged human being. And, from Bridget's legal background, innocent until proven guilty, all of those sort of like elements. And they come out to play a lot in organizations where you'll have the manager who just wants somebody thrown out when they've only heard one side of a story or whatever it might be. So I think latterly I have been more interested in those areas when I've seen managers treating people really badly and going, oh, hang on a minute. And often I was the person who got involved in the appeals process, and then it could still go away because you were the person saying sorry if somebody needed an apology, or helping them see what responsibility they needed to have for how the situation had unfolded. But a positive culture, I think, needs all of that sort of ingredient as well, so that the whole gambit, the benefits piece and the appreciation, but the appreciation of how human you can treat people, whatever the situation going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I've made a bit of a shift in what I'm focusing on, out in my company. And my last 2 books I've written are specifically for managers, because everything else I was writing was for HR, to help HR design engagement programs and values and recognition programs. And over again, in my talks and my books, I talk about how, well, we can do a great job, but if our managers don't get it right, it's never going to work. So I've shifted my focus, and it leads into what you said about employee relations, because I genuinely believe, if I think back to all the employee relations situations I've been pulled into, a large percentage of them will go away if we can help our bosses be better at their job and help them understand in more empathetic, caring ways. And then I think that, we are human. There still will be situations, but I do think that we can definitely reduce the percentage of these things and make it better for everyone. I know in situations where I've done ER with managers, every time light bulbs go off in their head and they're like, I didn't realize I did that. Next time, I am not going to make the same mistake. So yeah, I'm excited about how empowering managers and equipping managers will change the HR role as well. Yay!
I think that allows you the moment to actually give a plug for the latest book on bad bosses, because I think that some of the things that we're actually discussing plays very much into the things that you're saying there. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything in like a summary version. I know that you're probably sick of it if you've just been recording it audio wise for 3 days, but it may well be prominent in your mind. So this could be a moment to bring some of that to the fore in the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just taking a step back and, saying why I decided to write this particular book. Because as I said, my other books were for HR. I wrote this book because, well, the title of the book is Bad Bosses Ruin Lives. And it's a phrase I used when I was describing to my co-author in my second book, how I'd had a boss who ruined my life and how, if you're having a bad time at work, you take it home with you type of thing. So I've had a bad boss, but also, if I'm really honest with myself, I've been a bad boss myself. And I just thought, all these things I've learned throughout the years and all the things I wanted to learn, because a lot of times I write a book so I can learn myself. So I interviewed 20 thought leaders in the area. And I wanted this book to be able to help bosses be more aware of what they were doing wrong, accept it, and then take action. You know me, you said I like acronyms. I also like 3 easy steps. And that's what the book's really all about. Whether you read it or not, I just want people to make sure that their bosses go through those 3 steps, because I'm doing a Disrupt HR talk and it's all about awareness. Because if we don't start with awareness and be aware of what we're doing wrong and accept it, we're going to continue making the same mistakes. We're going to continue going back to ER, having ER issues and pulling HR in. So it's really just, helping bosses, we call it step into their greatness, because you want to be a great boss. Nobody wants to be a bad boss, and your people need it. So that's the 2-minute summary.
Fab. Bridge?
Yeah, I love this, Deborah, because it resonates so strongly with me. I've been very open that I left an organization because of a bad boss, and it had a really, really huge impact on my mental health. Probably still impact on my mental health now. But what really resonated with me was that honesty that you have, that you also have been a bad boss. And that's something that I am very aware I have been. And I think that particularly in times where I have been under the cosh from a bad boss, and I think it sort of trickles down an organization, particularly if, and you're absolutely right, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the boss that impacted so badly on me. And I'm very aware that I doubt very much that she was setting out to be that way. And I strongly suspect she's totally unaware of the impact that she has. And yeah, so I really like that idea of, people complain about bad bosses. We all say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And there is this element that, going back to the beginning, of some responsibility. We all have responsibility to set boundaries, to give feedback, to do the best you can. And I think that often we have to recognize, as you said, we're all human. We are trying our best. Sometimes that's not good enough, and we need to sometimes be helped to recognize that. So yeah, I think that book should be on every reading list, and particularly within the United Nations. Well, just saying.
No, I didn't use the word unintentional, but that's like one of the first words we use in the book, because we did a survey and 99.6% of people said they've had a bad boss, which basically, you don't have to be a mathematician. We all at some point in our life are going to be a bad boss. And I genuinely believe that maybe 5% of people do it intentionally, but everyone else, like my bad boss who ruined my life, they did not do it intentionally. When I went back and had the nerve to speak to them, they did not know the damage that they were doing. And, I talked to someone else the other day because everyone wants to share with me their bad boss story. And they said the same thing. I said, well, do you think they knew that they were bad, doing something wrong? And she said that she ran into them a couple of years ago, and the person just ran up to them and apologized and said, I did not know that I was doing this. And, they were horrible, but didn't know it. So, I really want to help people just make sure that they take the steps to do better, because you talked about the damage. Funnily enough, my co-author, who's my husband, is obsessed with t-shirts. He's an IT person and they all love their t-shirts. And he just sent me this morning a mock-up of a t-shirt, because I have this phrase, bad boss stress disorder, which talks about the idea of how, you have the pain for years. So he's designing a t-shirt with an X through it, something about, let's get rid of bad boss stress disorder. Yeah, I'll send you a copy when he has it designed. There you go.
So Sunday we're going to be starting talking about BBSD.
Yes, yeah. But it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I had so many people write to me and tell me how, years later, they still felt the pain. I mean, I did. I remember when I went from my bad boss to my next boss, who was amazing. And she kept giving me a hard time and said, quit looking over your shoulder. I am not going to stab you in the back. You're fine. You're safe. Everything's okay. And it probably took me a year just to believe her, because I was just so nervous about it all.
With the work that I do on somatics, and the truth being that everything that ever has happened to us lives in our tissues, there is no surprise that what happens to us with experiences of bad bosses continues to live in our sinews. And it's the new practices that you have to get into to alleviate that. And yet there's some bizarre thing that goes on where often people, where they feel a level of pain, it's almost sitting within their comfort zone because they're so used to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that you've lived in a way for so long that it's almost, that's where the expectation suddenly comes from, that's why you're still doing the things that you've always done, even if the environment and the scenario and the people in it are different. And trying to get out of that. I mean, Bridget and I have talked about this, but from our own experiences, and it sounds like similar experiences to yours as well. But when we're saying 99.6% of people say that they've had a bad boss, there's a lot of people living with that sort of after effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want people to think that they're all ruining lives, because there's different degrees of it. One of the stories I talk about how is, I was a bad boss in this situation. And, I just said something that was like one of the kind of bad bosses that we have. We talk about 10 types of bad bosses. And one of them is the coercer, who's all about power. And I told some silly story of how in a meeting, I'm like, we're doing it my way because I'm the boss. And it didn't ruin lives, because everyone just cracked up laughing, because they're like, what are you doing? But, that could have ruined someone's life if the scenario was different and that type of thing. So yeah, there's all different levels of it.
There's the gradients to it, isn't there? Absolutely. The other element is, it's lovely that your next boss saying, stop looking over your shoulder, I'm not going to stab you or whatever, because that's showing their level of awareness of what's going on with you carrying on in a particular way that's no longer required. So it's almost like the bad boss ruins the life, and then we have to make decisions about not continuing it.
Yeah, one of the building blocks. So I told you there's 10 types of bad bosses.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. But then the solution is a model called the Great Boss Building Block Model. And there's 14 of them. And one of them is trust. And we talk about something about people come with trust baggage. And I think that's actually where I shared that story, is how we all come with baggage from how we were treated with our other bosses. And we need to, you can't just get trust right away. Depending on what someone's been through, it might take longer or shorter to actually gain it.
We also say in these episodes, we're often telling stories about where things have gone horribly wrong. You've mentioned one thing about, we're doing it my way because I'm the bad boss. Are there any other, God, I don't want you to tell lovely stories as well, but we will get onto lovely stories, but are just any howlers that have been the biggest learning experiences from you?
I mean, I'll share one of the ones I share in the book, which is my go-to story, because I think it really just was my aha moment. I had moved from the US to the UK, and my great boss story is the person who took a chance on me and moved me from the US to the UK. And all of a sudden I was managing, instead of one person who was just like me, all of a sudden I was managing, I think, 5 people. Culturally were different than me, age wise, background, everything was different. And I thought I was doing a good job. We all had a good time, work got done. About 3 months into the job, a very brave employee pulled me aside and said, just want you to know, we have a Debra Corey support group that meets every Friday. And we share stories of how you upset us, or even how sometimes you made us cry. And this is one of the main reasons I wanted to write this book, because I had no clue that I was doing this at all. I was, going back to your bit about tissue, I was managing the way I had seen my bosses back in the States manage people, very much upfront, say it as it is, no filter, all the things that I learned in cultural training I should not have been doing in the UK. And yeah, I got it wrong. So I did ruin their lives for a couple of months, I'm sure, for 3 months. But luckily I got my shit together and figured it out. Or at least I told them I was figuring it out. So I wasn't perfect at the beginning, but at least they knew I was working on it. And when I made a mistake, they'd come up and tell me, and then we learned together. And to me, that's nirvana. When you're at that place where you've got that relationship with your people, that they can help you overcome your bad boss traits that, as we said before, we're all going to have.
Mm. Mm. Wow, that's amazing. Oh God, I can't imagine what I'd have felt. Well, I'm just thinking, I wonder how many people I've made cry and nobody's ever told me. So I'm really glad that you have people who did.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell some of the stories that people shared with me, but some of the devious, these are the ones that I think will never change. But some of the devious stories, like one person told me how a boss was getting really angry because they were spending too much time with their boyfriend. So they went into their email system and broke up with the boyfriend, pretending to be them. That is not one of the 10 types of bad bosses. So they're not in the book. So you're the first to hear that one.
Oh
yeah,
my
but
God.
it's devious. Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's psychopathic. I mean, that's
it is.
insane.
And one of the things we said is we don't want to talk about those kinds of bad bosses. All of our bad bosses are normal ones. They're safe. They're approachable. We even came up with emojis for them that make them relatable. Like, we didn't have scary emojis. Like the ignorer.
Your stickers are amazing. I love them.
Yeah, they were so much fun. They were probably just as much fun as writing the book, I have to say.
You should get t-shirts done of those as well.
I would love a world where people weren't afraid to wear a t-shirt. Like, I am definitely a micromanager. I'm a recovering micromanager. I could wear a t-shirt that says that I am a recovering micromanager. That's what we should do. That might make it safer if I say, I'm recovering, I'm working on it. Be patient.
I love that. That's brilliant. Yeah. That actually just made me think. When I was doing a little bit of research on this issue of culture, positive culture, and I came across an article about the All Blacks and James Kerr, who was their coach. And so it's a rugby theme, and Bobby loves rugby. And actually, a couple of the most recent recordings that we've done have had some rugby elements to them. So anyway, All Blacks, James Kerr, they went through a bit of a bad patch. He came along and created this 15 mantras. And I won't go through them. I think that I'm going to save it for an episode on followership, because he effectively talked about making a team of leaders. But one of the mantras was no dickhead. And I kind of think that there's some people who need a t-shirt with that on as well. Recovering dickhead.
That's my favorite of the mantras. I mean, the book is brilliant as well. We'll put that in the resources.
Do you know, it's funny though, I wrote a book on company values. And I shared a company in Australia's values, and they took that as one of their company values. And what I love about it, same idea as what you just talked about, is they would use it in meetings. So if somebody in a meeting was being a dickhead, and the funniest thing about that is that when I wrote that book, I toured the world doing talks, and I learned how to say that word in lots of different languages. Don't ask me what, I don't remember any of it now, but I'd be like in one country. I remember I was in Bulgaria. Like, how do I say this in Bulgarian? And the whole audience would scream it. Or, another country, it was hilarious.
So in which case we could have a very inclusive t-shirt with it in all sorts of languages actually on the front of it as well. Fabulous.
Or follow your tour, actually. So your book tour should just have it, how they normally do it with the dates and the places you visit, but you should just have the dates and then the no dickhead in that language.
I was going to say, this has suddenly become a creative workshop. I love it. So what would be on your T-shirt, Bridge?
Well, I think the micromanager thing, I am a recovering micromanager. I think I'm sort of over that pitch, but I do have a tendency to be grumpy, like to share my grumpiness. We're doing an episode on emotional intelligence later on, and I was looking at sort of the elements of emotional intelligence and managing my own emotions so that they don't leak out to impact on the rest of the team, I think is one of the things. So yeah, how do I put that into a leaky emotion?
But
That
you know
sounds
what? We
weird.
set you up because we didn't tell you what the 10 types of bad bosses are. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that
Right,
one
okay.
could sort of spread across some of them. But it's funny because I do share a story in my book about it, and I share it in the book when I get to the point that you're never going to be perfect. You just need to figure out how to work with it. And I talk about how my alter ego, which is my grumpy, I don't know if yours has another name. Mine is Debbie. So when I'm nice, I'm Debra. When I'm grumpy, just ask my husband. I'm Debbie. And I had a situation where I got this really big project and I was really stressed. And Debbie was coming out, and I met with my team and I just told them, I'm like, I'm just going to warn you, Debbie is going to come out. What should we do? And they wrote a sign that put on my door where when Debbie was here, I would put the sign out and I would say, Debbie is in the office, enter at your own risk.
Awesome. I may have to steal that. I think that's brilliant. I'm going to have to think of a name for my grumpy alter ego.
Maybe ask your friends and family. They might be able to come up with a good name for it.
We already got the name in their support group.
Go ahead, Bobby. What's yours? Which is yours that you have it on your T-shirt?
Well, so mine. I think is very much, and I know that this has been levied at me before, that my passion for something can come across as quite aggressive, and so I think I might end up being an unappreciator because I get so absorbed in my own passion for it, I've forgotten for a moment about how it might be for other people.
Do you know what? I wish I had spoken to you when we were writing the book, because the unappreciator is actually the number one most common type of bad boss, which surprised me, but I don't think I had looked at it completely the way you are. And the reason for it. So a lot of times when I think of an unappreciator, it's someone who's not looking for the good and they might be focusing on the bad. But I love your perspective in that it's just you were in your bubble. And it wasn't intentional that you weren't doing it. It's just you were in your bubble doing the things that you were doing. So yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. So I'm a recovering one for that. I find that it seems to have lessened since I've become an independent, because I don't get into the shitty fray of politics of an organization. But equally, I am having to really watch myself that I don't when I'm consulting, because it's that learned habit of getting all in and taking on like the world. And so I really am having to check myself out quite carefully that I stay in a bubble that has everybody else in it, because I'm keeping myself sound with I'm only here for 4 days a month or whatever it might be. So it's a very different way of trying to look at it. So yeah.
It's interesting. I had that happen to me once. I don't think I put it in the book, but it was probably one of my first manager jobs. And I was so focused on being, a great boss. So I thought that I was all work and no play. And I was in the US then. And I remember hitting my 2-week notice and I just sort of let my guard down. And all of a sudden, instead of just talking about work with people and being in my bubble, I started like talking to people like normal. And they're like, you're a really nice person in the nicest way. We used to think you were such a bitch. And it was like, again, one of those aha moments. And like, why did I do this? Why didn't I just actually, spend the time to talk to people? You can still get work done if, you spend 5 minutes every day walking around and saying hello and asking how people are.
Excellent.
There's an element there also about authenticity, isn't there? In terms of you were trying to be what you believed as, inverted commas, the perfect boss, and this idea that it's all about productivity, it's all about the daily grind, and actually the real you, the good boss, the actually really great boss, was being sort of hidden because of that slightly skewed idea of what a good boss was, but that you didn't think it
Yeah,
was
I
you.
love that. So one of the building blocks is authenticity, and we talk about how you
Mm.
wear it. And you're right. I didn't wear it. I was wearing someone else's clothes when I was going into work. And you're right. It's like you need to put on your own version of your clothes or whatever it is, shoes, makeup, whatever.
That's a great mantra. I like that. I am intrigued, Deborah, with this positive culture, and we've said about it being everybody's responsibility. And there is the element of helping organizations to spot it, find what they actually want it to be, and then keeping it alive. And there's clearly been some learning along the way as well with what cultures must have been like in the US and then what that was like coming to the UK. And so, what are your key takeaways or the things that you would like to, say here on the recording about that level of the filtering into the culture and what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, like what it was like in the US. And when I think back to when people started talking about culture, I think we misunderstood it. We thought culture was all about fun. So I was probably living in San Francisco at the time. So all these tech companies, and they were the ones who just went crazy with culture, like free food, slides in the office, gyms, and I mean, just craziness. And it was all about fun. But to be honest with you, I think it was about doing everything to get people to work 24/7. They didn't want to leave the office. And I think
Mm.
that we've gotten more intentional about culture, both in the US and elsewhere around the world. And my whole approach to intentional culture is it's well beyond fun. It's about having meaning behind it. And going to the ABCs, of course, I have three things, which are: culture starts with having a shared purpose. What are you all about? What are you trying to do? What makes you guys different? Shared beliefs through your values and your behaviors. That's what, don't be a dickhead. That becomes a part of your culture. It does. We had a value, one of my favorite values at one company was speak up. That was a part of our culture. In meetings and in everything you did, it was a part of who you are. And then the last part is shared actions, because it's all well and good to have the words, but how are you going to integrate speak up and don't be a dickhead into everything that you do? And to me, that's when culture flourishes, and that's when culture is unique from company to company. This free food and sliding boards and things like that are not true and genuine culture. That's not intentional.
It's performative,
Yeah.
isn't it? Ultimately, it's
Yeah,
a performative
absolutely.
thing.
It's beautifully simple as well, because the other thing that I wonder about your view on, Deborah, is that when companies are starting talking about values, behaviors, beliefs, etc., now look, you find the company that aligns with what your personal ones are, but you can sometimes end up in organizations where they're not necessarily the same ones as your personal ones. And yet it's absolutely fine because you can align to them because of potentially purpose and action. And the whole thing is that with that simplicity of it in terms of how to build a culture, you can put anything into that makes sense for you. Whereas a slide and free food is look at me, which is like the bit of the top of the iceberg with a whole load of other crap going on underneath it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why it needs to all link up. And, what I tell my kids when they're looking for jobs is, definitely, I wrote a book on values. I'm obsessed with values. I think values are important, but equally
Mm.
talk to them about how they bring them out to play. How do they use them? Because it's all well and good to have, like a value of we care or we value diversity or whatever it is. What does that look like in reality? And I'll give you an
Mm.
example. We did a culture, a values audit. And one of the things that I found really simple, we had values that talked about, we treat everyone with dignity and respect. And then we had a vacation, a holiday policy, which many companies in the UK do this, where it's based off of years of service. So, you've been here 5 years, you get an extra day. You've been here 10 years, you get two. And I challenged them in the audit. I said, if days off are to help your well-being, how is that treating everyone with dignity and respect? And that's where I think companies, if you genuinely are going to have a culture that is who you are and flourishes, you have to do that audit. As a matter of fact, preparing for this, I said, you know what? I'm going to create a free DIY culture audit and just like pull everything from my brain that I do with clients and just put it out on my website just to share with people so that more people think this way. Because I just think it's so, so important.
That's amazing.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Love the fact that we will. And we will be strongly promoting that at every chance we can get. You heard it here first, people.
I'll add your names to it here at the bottom.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. With our little creative wave or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Bridge,
I've been hogging this. What would you like to say?
I think I want to stay on this positive culture theme because I think, we can recognize all the bad things that happen and the bad bosses, but we've acknowledged that actually most of the time it's not deliberate. Most people actually want to be a good boss. And so I think that focusing on what that means and how bosses can, apart from being aware of their humanity and their tendencies that might not be so positive, the sort of things that what creates that culture. So I've been following Aladdin Grant for a while, and so he's got a whole sort of load of predictors of what's needed in a good culture, and a lot of the things that we've talked about already that you've talked about in terms of having a purpose. I saw, communication for me is another one that's massive. And as I said, I stalked you a little bit. You did a podcast called Happier at Work. I think it's an Irish podcast, actually. So yay, Ireland. And one of the things you identified was this idea of hoarding information, not sharing information. And the example that you gave about when you changed the benefits in an organization, but you shared the information about that, it sounded as if there was good communication because people were losing things, but they bought into it because they understood all of the process. And I've talked to Bobby previously about this idea of, I think it was when we were talking about silos, and this idea of power being in information and how often leaders particularly, and then at different levels in sort of management hierarchies, will hold on to information because it's their precious, it's their power. And I'm really interested in how you would look at helping bosses unlearn maybe that tendency that information is power, and that actually shared information is much more influential.
Absolutely. And I love that because I mentioned earlier about the building blocks, and one of the building blocks is communication. And it's something that, my very first book I wrote was on communication, actually. Very, very, very first book. And that's because, to your point, I've seen when it can actually rip apart every good thing that you do. And, going back to that example that you said, I mentioned about the benefits before, where I, reevaluated all the benefit programs and I got rid of 2 of their favorite benefit programs. But it was purpose led. There's a reason why we did it. It was similar. One of them was what I said before, where I got rid of people having more vacation days because of years of service. And it could have gone really bad, but I shifted the power in that I gave them the knowledge. I explained to them the why. One of the things I got rid of was a lottery where every month people could win money. And we were spending a lot of money on this. And it just didn't align with who we were. So I took that money and I put it into a recognition program. And it was just so funny because people came up to me afterwards and completely get it. We understand, it was definitely the right thing to do, but can you wait another month? Because I'm probably going to win this month or something like that. So, but that was the difference between communication working and not working. Use it another way. I remember another time this was a while ago. I worked in retail and we got rid of, do you remember when people used to get double time working on a Sunday? Because it was considered unsociable. I mean, now it's not like that at all. And we just got rid of it. Oh my gosh. And we didn't explain why, how the legislation was changing and everything like that. It was horrible. I'm sure we had employees leave. So I've definitely seen when communication goes right and when communications go wrong. So, some of the things that we talk about in the book about communications are things like do it continuously, don't hide behind the curtain, be open, honest, and transparent about it. Communicate with empathy. Don't just say, I'm getting rid of it, but understand how they're going to react and make sure you do it. And then also don't assume people understand. So check for understanding. But yeah, absolutely. Communication is absolutely important and critical, especially for culture and engagement.
Mm. And I think one of the other themes that's come out over quite a number of our podcast episodes recently has been kindness. And that was another trait that Adam Grant had identified was kindness. He said that leaders' kindness and generosity are strong predictors of how a team will perform. But I'm pretty sure that that also then must, as we say, you know, we all have responsibility, but having that sort of culture of or expectation of kindness and generosity, I think particularly even more, I mean, obviously important, but even more so now with Gen Z and Gen A, who are so, or seem to be so focused on kindness as a really important element of their working lives and an expectation, much more than I think. You know, I'm not sure when I first started working that if you'd asked me, I would have been like, well, I kind of want the culture to be kind. I would never have even imagined saying that. But, you know, Gen Z and Gen Alpha seem to be very focused on that and willing to call it out and willing to leave if they don't see it. So I just
Do you
wondered
know, it's
what you thought
interesting,
about
as
that.
you're saying it, kindness is not one of the building blocks that we have. And the reason it isn't is that I'm the kind of person who, to me, kindness is sort of a vague word. I want to know, what does it look like to be kind? But if I go through every single building block, they all have kindness. So empathy, that's being kind. Compassion, that's being kind. Authentic communication. So absolutely 100%. But I think it's overarching. So much so that my second book I wrote was on employee engagement. And we defined employee engagement in three ways. And during the pandemic, I added to our definition to say that an engaged employee is someone who believes that their company cares for them and is compassionate and kind. Because I was seeing during the pandemic people who loved their company, were engaged with their company, and then their company was not treating them well during the pandemic, and they left. And I agree. I think it's not just the pandemic, but the new generations coming in. I think of my kids. It's a non-negotiable. If they're not going to be treated with compassion, kindness, empathy, all those other things, appreciation, whatever it is, they're going to walk out. They're just not going to take it from us. And you know what? Good on them. I wish I had the nerve to do that when I was their age.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't.
Yeah.
I was looking at LinkedIn this morning, and again, the thorny topic of working from home, hybrid working, flexibility is coming up. And I think that that is becoming quite a mainstay of culture with the amount that we're hearing about it. It's not a topic that's going to go away anytime soon. And even that, I think, is feeding into what you're saying about kindness and understanding, rather than this capture all, we're getting everyone back to the office, or capture all, it's going to be 2 days, 3 days, whatever it might be. Because I think there's the different demographics and a very different situation in life since COVID. People have seen different ways of working. And what the Gartner research was saying was that it is having no effect on productivity, whether you are working from home or in the office. What it is doing is people voting with their feet if there isn't the flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's embedded in the kindness element as well. You know, commuting costs, childcare activities. There's all sorts of different things. Everyone's story is different, feeding into what an organization wants to do. And so the hybrid working or being in collaboration, that whole business about doing something without communicating, Deborah, it all feeds back into that. I don't want to turn this into a flexible working podcast, but I think it's a key topic about culture that's the biggest shift that we've been seeing in recent time.
And you know what? I love that, because I 100% agree. I think that kindness is so integral in what companies decide about how to bring people back to work. And I get really, really pissed off at these companies who just make up these numbers. Everybody has to come in 3 days a week. I posted something the other day because I can't remember the term. Everybody's putting the word quietly in front of everything, where people are like giving each other their passes so that it looks like they're coming into the office, but they're not really coming into the office. And my post said, don't you think that should be telling you something? Doesn't that mean that your employees are telling you that it's not that just they don't want to, but they don't need to come in? To me, that's the big crux there. And that's where kindness absolutely plays. At the core, kindness is about understanding your employees, supporting your employees, respecting your employees, in your actions, which going back to the three, the ABCs of culture, that was my third one, which was action.
Yeah.
How are you doing it through your actions?
What a lovely culture of subterfuge, passing your passes on to everyone. Is that what they were aiming for? Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you're seeing people do that, doesn't that mean that it's not working for you?
Absolutely.
I had a picture when I was trying to make the point about, what a disengaged employee looks like. And I have this picture of a dog sitting in front of their computer. And what I say when I did this slide was I say something about a disengaged employee is so disengaged, they have their dog fill in for them during video calls with the camera off. So it's like, yeah, that's not working.
This has been super interesting, and I would love to continue, but we're now at the time where we have to sort of close down. So, Bobby, did you have any final questions?
So I haven't got a quote for the day because I wanted it to be Debra's voice being quoted throughout, which I think we've got some real pearlers, which is great. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to ask our question though about what your younger self could tell you. We've turned it on its head. So what would you have your younger self say to you now about how you are living life?
Yeah, and it's not related to what we've been talking about all along. I think my younger self did not understand how to prioritize, how to focus on what was important, what would make the biggest difference. I did tell the story earlier about, I was just 100% work. And I think that, the younger generations are much better at it, but make sure that you get that balance, you get that prioritization, and you do what's going to make the difference for you, both at home and at work.
Fabulous. Debra, it has been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much for giving your time to us today and to the people listening to this podcast. I hope that they all enjoy it as much as I have, and I'm sure Bridget has as well.
Thank you very much.
So much, Debra.
Thanks for listening. All of the resources mentioned in this episode are included on our website and Spotify page, so you can read, watch, dig a little deeper at your leisure. Next week, Bridget and I are tackling procrastination. Well, that of course will depend on whether or not we've found a stack of other things to do instead of recording. So here's hoping being a procrastinating prioritizer lands. Tune in and see.